No one noticed the little alien girl at first. Dock 7 was always loud. Machines hummed. Ships roared. People shouted in 100 languages. In a place like that, it was easy for something small to disappear. She sat near the back wall, close to the waste processors and the old heat vents. Her body was thin, wrapped in torn fabric that once might have been a uniform. Her skin was a soft gray blue, dulled by dust and hunger. Her eyes were too big for her face, always watching, always alert. She waited not for kindness, not for help. She waited for leftovers. Only when the food stalls closed and people walked away did she move. She crawled on her knees, slow and careful, like she was afraid the floor itself might bite her. She reached for half-eaten plates, cold protein strips, cracked nutrient bars, bones with just a little taste left on them. She ate fast, head low, back curved, one hand shielding the food while the other pushed it into her mouth. If footsteps came too close, she froze. If someone laughed, she flinched. If a voice got loud, her shoulders shook. She eats like a dog, someone said once. The girl did not look up. She had learned long ago that looking up made things worse. Most people did not even bother to insult her. They just stepped around her, or over her, or pretended she wasn't there at all. To the station, she was trash that moved. To the laws, she did not exist, but she tried to be good anyway. Every time someone passed near her, she paused her eating and bowed her head slightly. It was a small gesture, almost invisible, a sign of respect from a culture no one cared to learn about. She did it, even when people kicked her plate away. She did it even when security drones hovered too close. She did it even when hunger burned her stomach like fire, because once, long ago, she had been taught manners, and once, long ago, she had not been alone. Evan Holt noticed her by accident. He was human, tall, broad-shouldered, with tired eyes and grease-stained hands. He worked cargo shifts that never ended and slept in a bunk that barely fit him. He had learned how to survive, not how to live. On his third week at Dock 7, he was eating his dinner when he saw movement near the wall. At first, he thought it was an animal. Then he saw the eyes, big, watching him, watching everyone. He slowed his eating. He watched her crawl forward only after others left. He watched her grab scraps that even the wastebots ignored. He watched her freeze when laughter echoed across the dock, and something inside him hurt. Not pity. Memory. Evan remembered cold nights on a broken colony. Remembered eating fast so no one could take it. Remembered keeping his head down, because pride did not fill an empty stomach. The girl's hands were shaking, not just from hunger. From fear. A security drone drifted closer, its light scanning her thin body. She curled tighter around her food, protecting it with everything she had. Evan stood up before he realized what he was doing. The drone paused. Humans had weight. Humans had mass. Humans were trouble. It floated away. The girl did not move for a long time. When she finally relaxed, she bowed her head again, not to the drone. To Evan. He froze. She wasn't begging. She wasn't stealing. She was thanking him. Evan sat back down slowly, heart pounding. Around them, Dock 7 continued as always, loud, cruel, uncaring. But for a moment, in that dirty corner near the waste vents, something changed. Evan did not see a scavenger. He did not see a pest. He saw a child trying to survive, with dignity in a place that had none. And for the first time since arriving at the station, Evan Holt felt something stronger than exhaustion. He felt anger. Quiet. Focused. The kind that did not fade. The little alien girl lowered her head again and went back to eating like the world might end at any second. And Evan knew, deep in his bones, if he walked away now, he would hate himself forever. The next day, Evan returned to Dock 7 earlier than usual. The station smelled of burnt metal and oil. The heat from the engines made the air heavy, sticky, but he did not notice it. His eyes were searching for her. She was there, crouched in the same corner. Her gray-blue skin blended with the shadows. Her big eyes darted around nervously. When she saw him, they widened slightly, but she did not move closer. She never did. Distance was safety. Distance was survival. Evan carried a tray. Food from the main mess. Not scraps this time. Hot, fresh, edible food that had not been discarded. He placed it on the floor, a small distance from her, and sat nearby. She froze. Her hands hovered over the tray, trembling. Hunger was in her eyes, but so was fear. Fear that nothing good could ever belong to her. Fear that kindness was a trap. He said nothing. He just watched her. Minutes passed. She sniffed the food, tentatively touched it, then pulled her hands back. Her small shoulders shook. Tears welled up but did not fall. She lowered her head and whispered something in her alien tongue. Evan could not understand, but he felt it. Gratitude, fear, a prayer. Maybe all of them at once. Slowly, cautiously, she took one piece. Then another. Not like before when she ate fast, afraid of being noticed. Now she chewed slowly, savoring each bite as if tasting something she had never believed she deserved. Evan's chest tightened. He remembered the way hunger could break a child. How being ignored made a person smaller. How being cared for could feel like magic. After she ate a little, she froze again. Then looked at him. Just a quick glance. Then her eyes dropped. Evan smiled gently, but he did not say a word. Words might scare her. Silence, he decided, was safer. Day after day, he did the same. He brought extra food. Sat nearby. Sometimes she whispered to herself. Sometimes she watched him watch her. And always slowly, she grew bolder. Not bold enough to come closer, but bold enough to eat without flinching the moment someone passed. People began to notice. Some of the vendors grumbled. "She's stealing again," one said. "Why does he feed her?" Another laughed, loud and cruel. "That's encouraging pests now." Evan ignored them. Let them laugh. Let them whisper. Let them think he was foolish. He had made a choice, and choices were sometimes lonely. One evening, when the station lights flickered and the smell of hot metal filled the hall, he saw her pause in her eating. She looked at him with wide, watery eyes. Then, slowly, she touched the tray and bowed her head in a tiny, careful gesture. "Thank you," she whispered. Evan's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but no words could explain what he felt. Instead, he nodded and leaned back, letting her eat. Later, when the tray was empty, she pushed it away gently. She did not reach for him. She did not smile yet. But the way she lowered her head, the way her small hands folded together, spoke more than words could. She was learning trust. And Evan was learning something too. Humans were known for power, for machines, for weapons. But they were also capable of care. And sometimes, care was stronger than fear, stronger than hunger, stronger than cruelty. By the end of the week, she had stopped flinching when he walked past. She did not speak. She barely even moved. But her eyes followed him. Not with fear. Not with suspicion. But with curiosity. Evan watched her, feeling something strange. Something he had not felt in years. Hope. Doc 7 remained loud and uncaring around them. The vendors still muttered. Security still glared. But in that little corner, the girl had found a small island of safety. And Evan had built it without saying a word. Every leftover he had once ignored, every crumb of pity he had refused to give, had led to this. To a moment where he could see her not as a scavenger, not as a hungry alien, but as something more. A child who deserved to eat in peace. A girl who might one day learn to smile without fear. And Evan knew. Deep in his bones, that he could not let her face the station alone. Not ever. She had survived this long by hiding. But he would teach her another way, that sometimes someone would see her, truly see her. And she would not need to hide anymore, the little alien girl. Eating leftovers like a scared animal, was slowly learning to trust. And Evan Holt was learning what humans did best, protect those who could not protect themselves. Days turned into weeks. Evan came every day, always bringing food. Sometimes he brought scraps from the human mess, sometimes fresh meals. Every time, he placed it carefully in front of her and sat a few meters away, watching. She never came closer than a cautious arm's length. Trust, he realized, could not be rushed. One evening, after the heat vents hummed and the dock's engines settled into their constant drone, Evan noticed something new. The girl was sitting more upright than before. Her small shoulders no longer curled inward as much. She picked at the food, not in the frantic way of a starving scavenger, but slowly, carefully. She was learning the rhythm of safety. Evan swallowed hard. He wanted to speak, but words could scare her. Instead, he waited, letting her eat, letting her trust him in her own time. He remembered what it felt like, long ago, to be afraid of kindness, to think it might be a trick. Finally, after she had eaten, she pressed her hands together and lowered her head. Evan leaned forward slightly, heart pounding. "What's your name?" he asked gently, not demanding, just curious. She froze. A small, silent shiver ran through her body. Then she shook her head violently. No, she would not tell him. Evan nodded slowly. He had expected this. Names were dangerous. They could be taken, used against someone. His chest tightened at the thought of what she might have experienced before. Doc 7. He understood without needing her to explain. "Okay," he said softly. "You don't have to tell me." "Not yet." Her large eyes blinked at him. Slowly, she lowered her head again. A silent thank you, he realized. She was showing him trust without using words. After that night, a quiet understanding formed between them. Evan continued to bring food. Sometimes hot, sometimes cold, sometimes sweet, sometimes bland, but always carefully, respectfully. The girl began to move a little closer over time. Not enough to touch him, but enough to let him see her without fear. Her eyes no longer darted wildly when footsteps passed. Her hands no longer shook as much when she reached for the tray. She was learning, day by day, that someone could care without expecting anything in return. Evan noticed the small gestures too. How she brushed the dirt from the floor before sitting. How she rearranged the scraps into neat piles before eating. How she occasionally looked at him, just for a moment, as if trying to read his intentions. One night, the station lights flickered and the engines roared louder than usual. She froze as always. Evan reached slowly toward her tray, resting a hand on the edge without touching her. "It's okay," he said softly. "No one's taking it. You can eat." She looked up, and for the first time, she allowed herself to smile just slightly. It was tiny, almost invisible, but it reached her eyes. Evan felt warmth in his chest. A small triumph. Over the next few days, she began whispering more. Not words he could understand, but sounds that carried meaning. Sometimes she hummed while she ate, sometimes she muttered softly to herself. He realized she was talking to someone only she could see, telling stories, naming things that mattered to her. He never interrupted. He only listened. And he felt honored, as if she was allowing him to witness a secret part of her world. And then one evening, when the dock was quiet except for the hum of distant engines, she finally spoke something that sounded like a name. It was soft, broken, almost swallowed by fear. Evan didn't understand the language, but the moment was clear. She had chosen to share a piece of herself, her name. He smiled. "I hear you," he whispered. She lowered her head and pressed her forehead to the floor. Not in shame, not in fear, but in reverence. Evan realized that trust, once earned, could be as powerful as any bond he had known in his life. From that night on, something shifted. She was no longer completely alone. She still ate cautiously. She still flinched at sudden sounds. But when Evan was near, she let herself relax, even just a little. And Evan understood something about humans and their role in the galaxy. We were capable of great violence, yes, but also of great care. Sometimes all it took to change a life was patience, presence, and a willingness to see the invisible. The little alien girl, once just a shadow hiding behind scraps, was beginning to trust. And Evan Holt, the weary human who had once thought he only survived, realized he had found a purpose that went beyond himself, to protect, to witness, and to help her discover that she was more than leftovers on a dock. She was beginning to feel, for the first time in her life, that she belonged somewhere. And in Dock 7. Surrounded by noise and cold metal. That was a small miracle. Not everyone at Dock 7 liked the little alien girl or Evan. One bright, humming morning, while Evan brought her a warm meal, a station officer appeared. He was tall, perfectly uniformed, and cold. His eyes scanned the corners like a predator. His voice carried authority and a threat that made even seasoned humans flinch. "Unauthorized presence," he said, pointing at her. "Vermin laws apply. You cannot stay here." The girl froze. Her hands tightened around the tray. Her big eyes filled with fear. She shrank back, curling her small body as much as the walls would let her. Evan stepped forward before thinking. "She's under my protection," he said, his voice firm, low, unwavering. The officer laughed. "Protection? From what?" "She's property trash. She has no rights here. Move aside, human, or I will remove her myself." Evan's chest tightened. His hands shook, but not with fear. With rage, he clenched them into fists. "Touch her again," he said, his voice cold like steel, "and I will break you." The officer blinked, surprised by the human's audacity. A dock full of bystanders had stopped to watch. Most were frozen in the middle of work, unsure if they should intervene. Evan knelt beside the girl, wrapping his jacket around her shaking body. Her head rested against his shoulder, trembling. She had never sought protection before. She had survived alone, trusting only shadows and scraps. Now she was allowing a human to shield her. "Look at her," Evan said to the crowd that had gathered, his voice rising above the hum of engines. "She eats our scraps and still bows to us. She shows respect when no one gives her any. And you call her trash?" Silence fell. The station, always noisy, felt frozen. The officer's face darkened. He pointed at her again, but the crowd began murmuring. A vendor muttered, "Maybe the human is right." Another security drone hovered nearby, uncertain. Humans had a reputation, the crowd remembered. For violence, for chaos, for loyalty that could not be bought. No one wanted to test it today. Evan stayed on his knees, holding the girl close. He whispered, "It's okay. I'm here. I won't let anyone hurt you." Her small body relaxed slightly, though the fear did not vanish completely. She had learned to survive by running, hiding, shrinking herself. But now she allowed someone else to stand in front of her. To fight, the officer backed down. Not because of orders, not because of law, but because he knew some humans would not hesitate to destroy anyone who harmed those they had chosen to protect. The crowd watched as Evan placed his hand gently on her head. She lowered it, pressing her small forehead to his chest. A silent gesture, but full of trust, gratitude, and relief. Evan could feel her heartbeat against him, fast, scared, alive. And he made a decision in that moment that would shape both their lives. He would not allow anyone ever to hurt her again. Dock 7 was cruel, loud, and indifferent. But here, in this small corner, he could create safety. Even if it meant defying rules, angering authorities, or facing danger himself. The little alien girl had survived because she was alone. But now, for the first time, she was not alone. Evan whispered softly, "No one touches you. Not while I am here. Not ever." She closed her eyes, letting herself believe it. Not completely, but enough. Enough to feel warmth for the first time in her life that was not from food or heat vents. And for Evan, he realized something profound. Humans did not always need power to be remarkable. Sometimes their greatest strength was the choice to protect the weak around them. Dock 7 continued its chaos engines humming. Vendors shouting, machines grinding, but in that little corner, a quiet revolution had taken place. A human had chosen to stand for what was right. A girl had chosen, for the first time, to trust. And that trust, fragile and new, was stronger than fear. Evan held her close, promising silently that this small, broken girl would never have to face the cruelty of the station alone again. And she believed him. Just a little. That belief would grow, slowly, surely, like a spark in the dark. And in the harsh, uncaring world of Dock 7, it was the most powerful thing that could exist. After that day, the little alien girl never feared Evan again. She still flinched at sudden noises, still kept to the shadows when others passed, but with him nearby, she could breathe. She had learned that some humans, rare as stars in the dark, could be trusted completely. And Evan had learned that sometimes trust was stronger than fear, stronger than hunger, stronger than the cruelty of Dock 7. One evening, Evan found a small metal crown in a cargo crate. It was scratched and dented, nothing more than a toy, but it made him smile. He carried it carefully to her corner. She watched him, curiosity and suspicion flickering in her big eyes. She did not move closer, not yet. Trust was not a step to rush. "For you," he said softly, placing the crown gently on the floor near her tray. He did not touch her. He only waited. Her eyes widened. She hesitated, looking at him as if asking permission without words. Then, slowly, she reached out with delicate hands, touching the crown as though it might vanish if she moved too quickly. She turned it in her fingers, inspecting it with careful attention. Evan stayed still, watching. He knew this small gesture mattered more than words. She had never been allowed toys, or crowns, or gifts. She had only ever had scraps, shadows, and fear. Finally, with trembling fingers, she placed the crown on her head. It did not fit perfectly, but she straightened, and something changed. Her small shoulders lifted, her chin raised, and for the first time, she looked taller not physically, but in spirit. Evan felt a lump in his throat. She spoke then, softly, in her own language. The words were unfamiliar, but the meaning was clear. She was naming herself, claiming herself. Not as a scavenger, not as a stray, not as someone the station could ignore. She was naming the princess inside her. Evan smiled. "I see you," he said quietly. She pressed her small forehead to his chest, a silent gesture of thanks, respect, and connection. She had never been allowed such gestures before. She had never been allowed to belong. But now, for the first time, she knew that someone truly saw her. The weeks that followed were filled with small miracles. She began to brush her own hair with a bent comb Evan had found. She cleaned her corner carefully, arranging her food trays and scraps neatly. She no longer ate in frantic, fearful bites but slowly, savoring each morsel. Evan realized she was learning the rhythm of dignity, something she had never known. Evan watched her quietly, feeling a pride that warmed his chest. She was small, yes, fragile, yes, but she had grown in ways the station could never understand. A spark of something extraordinary glowed inside her, and he had helped nurture it. One night, he brought a small blanket for her to sleep on. She accepted it without hesitation, curling up on it carefully. When she looked at him, her eyes shimmered in the dim lights. She did not speak, But the trust in her gaze was louder than words. Humans had power in many ways: machines, weapons, numbers. But Evan had discovered a different kind of power. One that could change lives without firing a shot. One that could give someone a chance to rise above cruelty, hunger, and fear. The little alien girl, who had once eaten leftovers like a scared animal, was becoming a princess in spirit. Not because of a crown, or a gift, or even Evan's protection, but because someone had seen her as she truly was, and treated her as she deserved. Evan knew it would not be easy. Dock 7 was still full of loud, uncaring people. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and dangers. But she no longer faced them alone. And he would stand with her, silently, fiercely, always. For the first time in her life, she dreamed. Not of escaping. Not of hiding. Not even of surviving. She dreamed of being herself, of existing without fear, of living with dignity. And in that dark metallic corner of Dock 7, that dream began to take shape. The little alien girl pressed the crown gently on her head one more time, looking at Evan with eyes that glimmered like stars. He nodded at her, a silent promise that he would always be there. And for the first time, she felt like someone had chosen her, not for scraps, not for survival, but for who she truly was, a princess, even in a station built for cruelty, even in a world that had never cared for her. She was beginning to shine, and Evan knew with certainty that this was only the beginning. Life at Dock 7 did not change overnight. The engines still roared. The vendors still shouted. The metal floors still rattled under the weight of cargo ships. But a small corner where the little alien girl ate and lived had begun to feel different, safer, lighter, brighter. Evan made sure of it. Every day he brought her food, always fresh when possible. Sometimes he stayed longer, talking quietly to her in ways she could not understand, but still seemed to feel. He never forced her to speak or smile. He just existed nearby, a steady presence. And she began to notice that not all humans were dangerous. Some could be patient. Some could care. Some could protect. Other people in the station began to see the change. The vendors who once muttered and laughed at her now left scraps intentionally. For her, one said quietly. Security guards no longer hovered, unsure if they should interfere. A few curious onlookers watched Evan protect her silently and began to reconsider their judgments. The girl herself began to change too. She brushed her blue-gray skin clean when she could. She arranged her small corner neatly. She even started collecting little things she liked. A shiny bolt, a piece of colorful wire, and kept them carefully in a pile. Her hands no longer shook while eating. She no longer flinched at every shadow. Her large eyes still watched the station, but now with curiosity instead of constant fear. Evan watched it all silently, heart swelling. Humans were known for power, for aggression, for dominance. But he had discovered something else entirely. Humans could be gentle, fierce in protection, patient in teaching, strong in ways that had nothing to do with weapons or authority. One afternoon, he noticed her playing quietly with a metal cube she had found. She spun it between her fingers, smiled faintly, then looked at him as if to say, "Look, I can create too." Evan nodded, smiling. That tiny smile, so small and fragile, was a victory. A moment of hope in a harsh, unfeeling station. Weeks passed. She began laughing softly, a sound like wind chimes caught in a quiet breeze. She had never laughed before, not openly, not without fear. And Evan realized the truth. She had not only survived, she was starting to live. Sometimes she would reach out a finger and touch his hand, barely brushing it, testing the connection. And Evan would let her, never pulling away. He knew that trust was fragile. It could not be forced. It could only be offered and accepted in its own time. Dock 7's harshness did not disappear. People still whispered, still ignored, still judged. But the little alien girl had a shield now, not a metal shield, not a weapon, not even the law. A human shield. One who would stand between her and danger, one who would refuse to look away. One who would fight for her without needing anyone to order him. Evan sometimes thought about how small she was. How fragile, how alone she had once been. She had eaten leftovers like a dog, hiding from the world, expecting cruelty at every turn. And now she ate with dignity. She arranged her meals. She smiled. She laughed. She dreamed. And in all of that, he saw something bigger than survival. He saw hope. He saw potential. He saw the proof that one human, simply by refusing to ignore someone, could change the life of a being who had known only fear. That night, as the station lights flickered and engines roared, the girl rested her head on the blanket Evan had given her. Her eyes shone in the dim light, reflecting a life slowly being rebuilt. Evan knelt beside her quietly, watching over her like a guardian. No one had asked him to. No one would ever know. But he knew, because humans were capable of many things. Some were cruel. Some were selfish. Some ignored the suffering around them. But humans could also be patient, fierce, loyal, protective, and when they chose to care, they could create miracles out of the smallest sparks. The little alien girl curled beneath the blanket, clutching her tiny pile of treasures, and for the first time, felt safe enough to sleep without fear. In Evan, the human who had once thought he was just surviving, realized he had learned something far greater than endurance. He had learned what humans could truly do. They could save. They could teach trust. They could give a frightened little girl the chance to become more than leftovers. More than fear, more than a shadow. They could help her become a princess. And in Dock 7, where no one had expected it, that was exactly what was happening. Years later, people would talk about Dock 7 as if it were just another station in the outer sector's cold metal. Loud engines, endless shipments. But some remembered the corner where the little alien girl had once crouched, eating scraps in silence. Those who did remember did not remember the chaos. They remembered the miracle. It had started with one human, Evan Holt. He was ordinary in many ways, tired, overworked, unnoticed. But he had done something extraordinary. He had seen her. Not the scavenger. Not the pest. Not the vermin the station had called her. He had seen her as she truly was, a child, small, fragile, alone, but capable of greatness if someone believed in her. He had fed her, protected her, waited, listened, and through small, patient acts of kindness, he had changed her world. The girl had grown. Slowly, she learned to walk without fear. She learned to speak with confidence. She learned to laugh freely. She had discovered that life could be more than survival, that dignity could exist even in the harshest places. And she had named herself. Not because someone told her to, not because of law or title, but because she now knew she had the right. Dock 7 had noticed. The vendors left food on purpose. Security looked the other way. Some humans even started small acts of kindness on their own. One human had chosen to see the invisible, and that choice rippled outward. Evan and the girl whose name no one outside her trusted circle knew developed a bond deeper than language. She pressed her forehead to his chest when frightened. She leaned against him when tired. She laughed and played when she could. And every time, Evan reminded himself that humans could be both ordinary and extraordinary. That care, patience, and protection were as powerful as any weapon in the galaxy. Over time, the girl became a symbol. Not of rebellion, not of war, but of hope. Children of all species in the station whispered about her story. The tiny alien girl who had eaten scraps like a dog and had grown into a princess. Seen and protected by a human who refused to look away, Evan never sought recognition. He did not care if anyone wrote his name in the history logs. What mattered to him was the little girl, her safety, her smile, her growing confidence. And he knew something important, even in a galaxy built on politics, trade, and power. The smallest act of courage and compassion could change everything. The girl, once small and afraid, would stand taller than anyone expected. She would walk through life with her head high, not because the galaxy had offered her a throne, but because one human had given her the greatest gift of all, belief, and in that belief, she had found strength, dignity, and freedom. Years later, when diplomats debated policies or scientists wrote reports about the station, they would speak of Dock 7 and its failures. They would discuss laws, regulations, and efficiency. But the truth, the quiet, human truth was far simpler and far more powerful. A human had seen someone no one else did, and in doing so, had rewritten history for her. Evan Holt had done what